Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another episode from the Azure Happy Hour series. My name is Rashmita, and I am the event planner for Microsoft Reactor India. I'm here today joined by our very own host, Reshmi, and our special speaker, Connor. But before we start the session, I would request you all to read our code of conduct. We are all here together to learn, so please be respectful of other people's views, understanding of differences, being kind and considerate in the way you engage. The chat section is open throughout, and we do encourage you all to participate. Our speakers will answer all your questions during the session. So please feel free to drop all your questions in the chat section. With this, thank you all once again for joining us today, and let me bring in Reshmi into the stream to begin the session.
Hi
Hey,
there.
hi
Hi,
Reshmi.
Rashmita.
How are you
Hi,
doing
how are
today?
you? All
I'm
good,
all
all
good.
geared up. Friday
Yes,
morning,
yes,
and
Friday
we are
morning.
already pumped.
Absolutely. So, yeah, it's the
Awesome.
stage is all yours. And
Thank you
yeah,
so much. Yep.
thank you.
So, again, once again, everyone who has joined us today, thank you for joining. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon in whichever time zone you are in. And today, Reshmi, I'm going to talk about a product which I have personally also invested my good share of time and resource with, because this is something that we recently worked on and announced during Microsoft Ignite. And I have a very special guest, my partner in crime, who has joined us today for the session. So, with further ado, I don't want to waste any more time. Let's bring on stage Connor. So, Connor, thank you so much once again for making out time, and really, really happy that you could make it with us. So, just for the audience, right? Like, we can start off by a quick introduction of who you are, what you do, and what do we have in stake today.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Rashmi, and thank you everyone for having me here. Very excited to be here. I am a product manager at a company called Astronomer, which is the main commercial developer behind a very popular open source project called Apache Airflow. Um, I lead um, the team, the product team at Astronomer for our cloud product, Astro, and I've been working very closely with colleagues from Astronomer, with Reshmi and others from Microsoft on making that product, Astro, be available as a Azure Native ISV service. And we're very excited to show that to you today and give you a bit of a flavor of Astro and Airflow in general, if you're not familiar with either of those before.
Yep. So, as you all have just heard, we have a very, very exciting lineup for today. And I am super stoked to see what all we can talk to you and address your questions if you have anything immediately, because you have the expert in the call today. So, yeah, let's start off with the presentation. So, I think we can bring up the screen now. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So we're going to have a bit of a presentation, also some demos. The demos will be completely live. So please, everyone, cross your fingers for us. And let's get into it. So here's what we're going to cover. Um, we won't have time to go really deep into Airflow. It's a big project with lots of moving parts, but we will try and give a bit of an intro to it, especially hope that's helpful for those of you that may be new to the project. Reshmi is going to talk a little bit about what a Azure Native ISV service is in the first place. Then we'll look more closely at this new one in particular, Astro. And then we'll get into the demos. I'm going to show you how you can create an Astro organization from the Azure portal. You can actually, if you want, follow along with me and do that live with me as well. And then we will actually deploy a workflow that's connecting to Azure to that thing that we just deployed and try and run it and see what happens. So a very brief introduction to Airflow first. Airflow is a really big Apache open source project. So you might have heard of other Apache projects, like Apache Spark is another big one. Apache Airflow is one of those really big Apache projects. It has many millions of downloads every month, thousands of contributors. It's a very active community, lots of changes happening to it all the time. We do a new major release of Airflow about once a quarter. essentially what it is for is workflow management. And it's really data pipelines as code. Um, it's not, I sometimes like to joke, the company name is Astronomer. It's not really rocket science though. It's like, I need to take this data from Azure and I need to do some transformation of it and crunch it. And then I ultimately need it to wind up in a business report that my exec team is going to use to make some business decision about what new market should we enter next, or whatever it happens to be. Anytime you need to move data around and work with it, Apache Airflow is a great tool for doing that for. But a lot of what you do with it at the end of the day is quite simple. You're just taking files from one point, moving them elsewhere, and stuff like that. It has loads of features, and we're not going to go into all of these in detail. But at its heart, it's really about helping you orchestrate Python code. Like this is really the core reason why Airflow became so popular. There were and still are a lot of workflow tools out there. A lot of them are graphical in nature. Like, so you would draw like this graph of, oh, I load this data, and then you draw a line to the next box and so on. And they have a lot of nice advantages, those graphical tools, in terms of can be pretty easy to learn and get started with, and you don't need to be a coder. But when it comes to like the ultimate flexibility, it's very hard to beat code. And Python being a very popular programming language with, I think it might be the language that has the most developers in the world, or at least close to. Um, it it's very easy to then take your Python knowledge and apply it to workflows in Airflow. And so this project actually started um, at Airbnb in 2015. It was what Airbnb used for all their internal data movement and data processing. They decided to open source the project, and then it gradually took off from there. And there's lots of tools out there like this, not even just graphical ones. There's other code orientated orchestration tools as well. But for one reason or another, and all these features and things are part of the reason, Airflow kind of became the big one and became the sort of de facto standard for this kind of thing. Just one other thing I'll mention here really is a recent feature that's pretty exciting is data sets. So Airflow tradition, and you'll see this today in the demos. Airflow is traditionally very orientated around scheduling things on a timer. Like I need to update this business report every day or every hour or whatever it happens to be. Data sets are a way for Airflow now to become more aware of when changes actually happen. So I don't necessarily want to run this report every day. I want to run it every time the data is ready to be refreshed. So I have an upstream data dependency, and that thing updated, I should fire my workflow immediately when that happens. No need to like wait for the next midnight or something like that. Another very important part is alerting. So like I said, this is not really rocket science. Like if you think about, oh, I need to schedule some code to run, you might think, oh, I'll just put in a cron job or something. You certainly could. But then when you're starting to rely on this data for critical business decisions, and sometimes it fails, it's kind of hard to know, like, did it work correctly? Did it fail? If it's a very complicated workflow with 100 steps in it and it failed on the 90th step, you don't necessarily have to want to replay the entire thing from step one. You want to be able to just fix the problem and start again from step 91 and finish it. And Airflow gives you all these extra bells and whistles that something really simple like cron wouldn't give you. I kind of covered this quite a bit. Like it's used for really anything involving data. It doesn't strictly have to be, like, because it's Python orientated, like there's nothing to stop you making any workflow that you can write code for. It could even be like human processes, like orchestrating like an HR onboarding process, something like that. But it's not really used for that. It's really used for data processing and making business data available to applications. Starting to be more heavily used in the world of ML ops as well. So like just another little Azure tie here is we recently built and open sourced this chatbot for Airflow, which lets you ask any question of Airflow. This is using Azure's OpenAI under the covers. And we did it for two reasons. It's kind of useful anyway. It works quite well, actually. If you have questions about Airflow, you can ask them here at ask.astronomer.io and get pretty good answers. But also because we open sourced it, we're showing this as like a standard template for how you can use Airflow to build and orchestrate ML and LLM based applications. The core concept of Airflow is something called a DAG. Now, I really wish the person at Airbnb that originally created this project had called this just a workflow or something. It would be a little more simple and a little more obvious. But a DAG is a workflow in Airflow. It stands for Directed Acyclic Graph. And if you remember your computer science studies, for those of you here that have a computing background, that basically means the directed part is I have tasks that, or I have nodes in the graph that point in directionally to other steps. You start to see how the workflow comes here. And the acyclic part means that there can't be loops in it. This has to be a workflow that progresses from the beginning of the workflow to the end. It can't just spin in the middle forever. But you'll see the word DAG like ubiquitously in Airflow. You just have to remember it means workflow and move on from there. Inside a DAG, you have tasks. These are the things that actually do work. It's like grab this file from Azure Blob Storage, do some processing on it, then push it into Azure SQL when you're in the next task. That's kind of your tasks are making up your workflow, essentially. Tasks can do anything. Like the most popular operator in Airflow is the Python operator. So you can like literally just write any Python code you like. But there are thousands of pre-built operators for all the most popular and common data things that you might want to either read data from or write data to. So you often don't have to write raw Python. Like you can just use an operator to make it easier for you. And this is kind of touching on that breadth of integrations that exist with Airflow. So there are literally thousands. We, Astronomer, as the commercial developers of this project, we maintain our registry, which is here. You can just search Astronomer Registry and you'll find it. This is a good place to just, I want to connect to something with Airflow. Go onto the registry and search for it. And very often you'll be able to find it. You can find example workflows that use that. You can find information on how to make it work and so on and so forth. And including, of course, Azure, which is one we're going to actually use one of these in the demo today. DAGs look essentially like this. I won't spend too much time here because we're going to try and do one of these ourselves and actually deploy it for real. But basically, you get this Python file that defines your workflow. You define the relationships, those directed edges from one task to the next in your workflow. And then once you've deployed that to Airflow, Airflow will show you the graph of what that looks like. So in this case, it's a simple DAG that has two tasks, and those tasks would show up in Airflow URL.
Connor, so whatever you have presented so far, I know a lot of folks who might have joined us today have probably played around with Airflow already, but we also do have a good pool of developers who are actually wanting to learn more who are joining the session. So for anyone who's looking for more Airflow 101 content, what is the kind of redirection that what is the kind of resource that we can like share with them so that they can learn more, and how can they make the most of whatever we are teaching today?
Yes, so because Airflow is such a big project, there is literally like tons of stuff out there, almost too
Yeah.
much. But my personal favorite is this. It's the Astronomer Academy. This is
Mhm.
what I used to learn Airflow initially. So when I joined the Astronomer company, I did these courses. These are really good. Mark Lamberti is very well known in the Airflow community. Mark is an astronomer employee, but Mark was pretty famous in the Airflow community before he was an astronomer employee. And he does these courses. He has courses on like Udemy as well. But like
Mhm.
he's done a lot of this kind of work. So there's actually a few courses here. There's the there's two courses on Airflow itself. There's kind of like Airflow
Mhm.
basics and then a deeper dive into Airflow. There's also a course here for Astro. These are all free. There are like certifications. You can get like the official badge, and there's a exam that costs money and what have you.
Mhm.
But the actual course material is all free and really good. So this is what I personally is my favorite. But all you need
Mhm.
to do is search for Airflow tutorial, and you will also find lots of stuff out there.
Yeah, yeah, I think given it's open source, we do have a lot of contributions from the developer community, but good to know that we have like a dedicated academy where we can
Yeah.
just learn the basics and already start geared up. One more thing which I wanted to ask when you were doing the presentation
Hmm.
is I understand the whole concept of event-driven scheduling, which Airflow has a lot of different kind of events which it can consume,
Hmm.
including the data sets example, which you mentioned that would be the
Hmm.
latest addition to the pilot, right?
Hmm.
So when this event-driven scheduling happens, we pick data from one place and take it to the other. But does it work similar to how we are doing these event-driven automatic scaling for clusters, or is that something which a developer has to work separately while they're configuring the DAG as well? Because it's possible that when the data comes from one place to the other, at that time they want more capacity for cluster or they want to like scale it up. Is that something also which needs to be taken care of as a separate unit, or is that also something which can be taken care of as a part of DAG?
So it's a very interesting question, actually, and it's one that has a little. It sort of gets into an area that has a little bit of debate inside the Airflow community, which is
Hmm.
should you use Airflow for actually crunching the data,
Hmm.
or should you use Airflow purely as an orchestrator, which is kind of telling the other things what to do? Um,
Hmm.
Historically, Airflow was largely used as the latter. Like Airflow
Okay.
might trigger a Databricks job or trigger some other like computationally heavy system. And then all that scaling and stuff that you're talking about would happen inside Databricks itself. So the
Mm.
Airflow workflow author or Airflow DAG author wouldn't really have to think about that. They just have to think, I submit this Databricks job, and then Databricks takes care of it. But as
Mm.
Airflow has become popular, and because it is like again, it's Python, so like it's flexible. You nothing to stop you from doing whatever you want. So
Yeah.
people do process data inside Airflow, and it's not like a full blown Databricks. Like it's not ever going to be that um, focused on that, but you can. When you're using Astro, you don't, as a DAG author, you don't have to really worry about that. So uh,
Hmm.
Astro will scale your Airflow workers for you automatically. So it's the worker is the thing that's actually running the tasks in Airflow. And in Astro, you can configure I'm I want to have at minimum this many workers, which can go with defaults to 0. So which is like
Hmm.
I'm not running anything, so I don't need any workers to run, and therefore I don't need to spend any money on Astro because
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
doing anything. All the way up to like I have 20 workers, and then as you're running tasks, Astro will just spin more workers in as needed to take care of that data. So
Okay.
Astro kind of helps you not have to worry about it.
Mm.
If you're running open source Airflow yourself, you can in theory do all the stuff Astro does, but it's more then you're doing the work. You're figuring that all out.
Yeah. 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 Astro makes it easier for you to
Yeah,
manage your
yeah.
airflows. Yeah. Understood. Cool. That's a great answer. And for the folks who are watching, just a reminder: you can always keep dropping your questions in the chat, and we will pick it up as and when we cover those sessions. So feel free to make the most of the session that we have today. And now I will quickly take over from Connor to talk a little bit about what Azure Native ISV Services is. As you can see in the screen, this is the product that currently we have looked into the integration for and moving forward. what exactly is Azure Native ISV Service? So what we are looking into is how do we bring a third-party application like Astronomer, for suppose, into the Azure ecosystem such that it has a very seamless connection, it has almost a first-party like experience. The nativity is what we work on, and all this while we make sure that the provision and management is completely taken care of for the customer. They do not have to worry about anything. So the way Connor just mentioned that Astro takes care of managing your airflow, what we do is we help in taking care of managing your data on Azure to send it to Astro, right? It's like a three-layer hierarchy. So now, if you have your data in Azure, all you got to do is you got to create your resource on Azure, which then maps to Astronomer. So with just one click on the Azure portal, you already have your resource over there on Astronomer, and now you can just play around with your data and your airflows without having to worry about anything. So we will go deeper into what this integration is, but right now let me just bring back to what Azure Native ISV services. So currently we have a very wide portfolio of different kinds of top companies across the developer industry. We have categories from storage, networking, data observability, all of these, right? And Astronomer is the latest addition to our portfolio. And going forward, we also have a wide range of customers across the globe who have trusted us with their data, with their management, and they use our product on a day-to-day basis. So we have customers from all the range where we look into people on a day-to-day basis and like millions of transactions and many more to come. With now Astronomer in our portfolio, I'm sure that Connor can also assist to this. We are definitely going to add a lot more global customers over here. So this is an exciting journey. If you have not tried it out yet, we highly recommend that you try it out. And the product that we're showing today is probably going to be the testament for you to try it out and get a walkthrough while Connor is going to do the demo. So that's a little bit about what Azure Native ISV Services is and a quick brief into how the architecture looks like. So given that it's a three-layered thing, the customer interacts with Azure. So you end up being an Azure user. In the Azure portal or in the Azure marketplace, you see the offering of Astro, which is Astronomer's product. What we do is make sure that we handle your first party integrations, like if you want SSO, if you want VNet injection, if you're an observability specific thing, you want maybe like log forwarding, things like that. We make sure that we make those connections for you to get your data from here to there. And what the partner team does is ensures your data is being handled well, it's being operated for the right reasons, your connectivity and your login authentication, etc., is already made seamless. You don't have to log in again. It manages your billing and sends the billing accounts to us so that all your billing happens just from Microsoft. So now you're not talking about adding an additional vendor, right? You're just sticking to Azure, but in Azure you get the benefits of Astronomer. So that is what we are doing here today. And now I'll just pass it on to Connor and he's going to talk about what we have achieved so far.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I saw a question in the chat: is this a better tool for ETL? Yes, basically. Like, um, Airflow is a really good and really popular tool for ETL, and like really especially when you want your ETL tool to be code based, Python code based. It is the most popular tool in the world for that. And Astro just makes that better and easier to manage, essentially. Airflow being an open source tool. So you can do it all yourself, but it's just a lot of work to do it all yourself. And we help you with that. And not just help you, but actually give more features too, above and beyond the open source. I'm not going to go into big depth on any of these, but just to give you like a flavor of some of them. We kind of touched on this from Rashmi's question, actually. So we auto scale things for you, so you don't really have to think about that. We have a really powerful, you'll actually see this CLI a little bit in the demo. We have a CLI that makes it very easy to develop DAGs locally, test them, make sure they will work. I'm not going to test mine before I deploy it, but you should in the real world. And then deploy them to our cloud environment where there is I'm not going to show the cloud IDE today, but we have an IDE built into our product that lets you author Airflow workflows, even if you're not familiar with Python, like if you're a SQL business analyst, you can use the Cloud IDE to just write SQL, and it will generate the Python for you under the covers. We support private networking, so if you're on Azure and you need to do VNet peering and things like that, you can do that. We have a UI that you'll see a little bit of in the demo, where if you have multiple Airflow instances, we give you visibility across all of them. That's a really common use case for our customers. They have often multiple teams inside the company that are using Airflow for different purposes. They often have different requirements. Like one of them is using one version of Python, another team a different version, or different, not just Python itself, but just different libraries that they rely on. So Astro makes it very easy for each team to get their own Airflow, or even their own dev Airflow and prod Airflow. So they can work independently of each other and not clobber each other and things like that. And then a very important aspect is just the support. As we are the commercial developers of this project, we know it really deeply. We write most of the code for it. So if and when you run into problems and have questions or issues, we're there to help you. And then I'm gonna jump over and try it out.
Yeah. I just want to take a minute to say that the previous slide that you showed, the power packed solutions that Astro is currently providing in order to make your day to day data management easy, I think that's commendable. Like, I definitely, for one, think that everyone who is into orchestrating data and wanting to have a better solution should definitely give it a try before deciding whether they want to like go for it or not. I really think they will be amazed by the kind of service that we have right now. So yeah, back to you.
Yeah. And yeah, so if anyone wants to try this out in Azure, you can go ahead. It's free to try, actually. So it actually, there's really no harm to give it a try. If you are not running, you can create an org. If you're not running anything, it's not going to charge you anything. But even if you do run some stuff, we give you free credits to get going with. So you can do quite a lot
Mhm.
of experiments without it costing anything. And then if hopefully you find it useful and you keep using it, but if you want to just check it out and then delete the resource after you've played around, you can absolutely do that. Um,
Yeah.
I think
I think
Registry
what we
has,
could
or go
possibly
ahead.
do, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we could what we could possibly do right now is like we can use the link and put it in the chat, the astronomer try link,
Yeah.
and we let people to like do the hands-on along with you if they want to do it right now, and we will definitely give the resources towards the end of the session as well.
Yeah. So that, yeah, perfect. So that link would take you straight to it. But it also, even if you don't have the link, it's like the Azure portal is pretty nice. So you can just
Yeah.
go into the portal, search for Airflow, click into the service. So it's very easy to find, even if you don't uh, have one. Oh, I actually have, from the previous webinar that we did earlier
Yeah.
this week, I have one running here. This actually shows a nice thing that you can do here is if you have different teams in Azure who have different subscriptions, they might not even know each other exists. They might not have visibility of each other's subscriptions, but they can create their own orgs and be separate from each other and have separate billing and so on, if you like. I'm going to go ahead and create a new one here, a second one. This is just a personal Azure account, so I actually do only have one subscription. So I'm just going to go ahead and make this resource in the same subscription. If I did have any billing events, this is where the billing would go to. I pick a resource group. Resource group is just a good way of keeping your Azure resources together, and you can see all the billing like broke for one project broken out by resource group and so on. You pick a resource name. For you, if you were doing this for real, you might call this like Airflow or Astro Airflow or something like that. I guess I will do like reactor. Did I spell that right? Hopefully. And you pick a region. Right now, the only region here is East US, but we're adding more regions next week, so that's pretty cool. I also want to mention here that the region here is just where does this Azure resource live. This Azure resource is like a sort of a thin holder of your Astro org. Inside Astro itself is where you're going to deploy your Airflows. On Rashmi's slide, she showed how Azure is kind of the control plane and then the native ISV service, which is Astro in this case, is the data plane. And in that data plane, you pick where do I want my airflows to run, and there's a lot of Azure regions that are supported in there already. So even if East US is not ideal for you here, it doesn't actually affect where is your actual Airflow data going to be stored. I'm just going to pick Reactor again. Typically, this organization is your company name. Inside Astro, you can have multiple workspaces. They're a good way of organizing things and keeping teams separate from each other. You don't have to have more than one, but you need at least one. So you pick your initial workspace here, which I'm going to do. There's just one plan, so you don't need to pick anything here, but just to highlight how it works, it's fully consumption based. You can get more details on our pricing here. So there's no charging unless you're actually running something. And even if you are running something, like I said, there's $300 of credits to get started. So there's no harm to give it a try. So I'm going to go ahead and create this. This will take a couple of minutes to run through. I think I covered a lot of these points anyway, but just in case if I missed any, while we're waiting for that to go through, we'll just mention these. So one thing you'll see once the resource is created is the SSO to log into the Astro application is set up for you by this process that we've just done. So you don't need to create like a new user in Astro to log in there. You don't need to set a password. You just go in with your Azure credentials. Any billing that does occur would go through the Azure subscription that you chose when you created the org. If you have a MAC, which is like an agreement with Microsoft for a certain amount of spend that you're going to do on Azure, which is in total, like across all your use of Azure, not just Airflow. This use of this product would help you burn down your credits on that, or burn down your commitment on that thing. And as you actually saw, you can create multiple Astro orgs if you need from Azure. We're still waiting here. I guess we can see if there are any questions while we're waiting for this to complete. Oh, well, there we go.
Yeah, we didn't have time for questions.
All right. So this, like I said, this is really just a thin wrapper for your Astro org. What you have here is a URL which will take you into Astro. This would be a good thing to bookmark. And even to give to other people in your company that you want to be able to log in. The cool thing about this URL is if I click it, it's just going to take me straight into the Astro org, and I won't have to log in again because I'm already logged into Azure. You could just go directly to our login page too. Like our login page is at cloud.astronomer.io. You could go there, you could enter your email. It will redirect you over to Azure to log in, which is fine. But if you've used that special URL that I showed, you don't need to type your email or anything. It just takes you right in. And this is what Astro looks like once you're in. We like to think we make it fairly easy to get started with. Like it kind of shows you what to do next. And this is what we're actually going to go through next. We're going to actually create an Airflow on here and try and deploy some DAGs to it. I'm going to take the first step, which is to create a deployment. And I'm just going to call it demo. I'm going to run this on a Azure standard cluster. There's a few options that I can pick from. I'll just leave it whatever the default one that it gave me. I'm not going to use a dedicated cluster in this demo, but if you do need private networking like VNet peering and so on, this is where you would go for that. You get, when you do the dedicated cluster, you get dedicated infrastructure entirely to you, dedicated network, dedicated everything. And so you, with that dedicated network, you can VNet peer it to other networks that you have. And you get a pretty wide range of regions that you can pick from in that case. I'm just going to do the standard one because that's all I need for this demo. There's also a lot of options that you could configure, including some of the auto scaling stuff that we were talking about earlier. But for this, I'm just going to go ahead and create this. I don't need to change anything. I can just accept the defaults. So this is going to take a few minutes to spin up and create the deployment. And what we're going to do while we're waiting for this is kind of get a DAG ready to actually deploy to this thing. There's a few ways that you could go about doing that. One is if you have existing Airflow DAGs, like in a GitHub repo, you can actually hook up a full-blown CI/CD process where you make changes in GitHub and you merge them. Those changes would be automatically reflected in your DAGs in Astro. There's also instructions here for if you're already using a different managed Airflow service and you want to migrate over to Astro, you can do that. But we're going to pick the middle option here, which is to use the Astro CLI to create an Airflow project. We'll put a DAG into that project, and then we will deploy that DAG up to Astro. And this is the part where I need to switch my screen sharing so that I can actually do this stuff. Just before I'll do that, I'll mention I already have the Astro CLI installed, so I don't need to do this part. If you are not on a Mac, you just click here for the other installation methods. There's Windows instructions there and so on. It's easy to install in most anywhere. Okay,
Yeah,
so I'm going to stop
while we wait
here.
for while we wait for the other screen to come up, there was one thing which I wanted to check with you, and why don't we give a little context on what exactly we're trying to do with the DAG? Is first thing that I would probably like the audience also to know and follow. The second thing is, out of the three options that you showed, is Astro CLI the vice of your choice? Is there a reason why someone should be considering using one other than the other, or are they all at par?
Um, I just shared the screen, by the way. Is it ready to show? Yeah. Okay, cool. So I think the CLI is probably the best way to get started.
Mm-hmm.
The others are really like if you are already running a different managed Airflow tool and you're trying to migrate
Mm-hmm.
over, there like then you want to do the migrate one, obviously. And the GitHub Actions one is really useful. To me, actually, it's more of a production thing. Like I would start
Mm-hmm.
with the Astro CLI, which is what we're doing now. It's a good way of
Mm-hmm.
experimenting and trying stuff out. But then if it's like, okay, this actually does work, I want to keep using this.
Yeah.
I don't want to have this on my laptop only. Like I need a proper code release policy. Then the
Mm-hmm.
GitHub Actions one is what you want. It'll show you how to set that all up. But I don't think you
Yeah.
need to do that when you're just poking around and experimenting and checking stuff out, if that makes sense.
So the GitHub Actions one, if I'm not mistaken, he also supports CI/CD, right? Like, so
Yeah,
every
yeah.
time
That
you check in a
every
code.
time you check in the code, yeah. But that's why I'm
Yeah.
saying it's more to me. This is just my own opinion. That's more like I'm actually ready to start using this seriously now in
Mm-hmm.
production. I want to hook up
Mm-hmm.
a real CI/CD process to this.
Yeah.
That's when you would do that. If
Yeah.
you're just doing a, a quick POC experiment, play around, the CLI is
CLI is
where I
better.
would
Yeah.
start. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 And
Makes
we're
sense. Yeah.
very future looking, but we're working on stuff to make this a lot smoother in future, like where there will be
Mm-hmm.
even better ways in future. But for right now, the CLI is the best way, in my opinion. And for your other question, what does the DAG do? This is the DAG. And because Airflow is Python orientated, like the Python code explains what the DAG does. Now, it's really a
Mm-hmm.
toy example. It's not a real,
Mm-hmm.
like, it's sort of just for fun. But what it does
Yeah.
is this is the meat of it, this upload
Okay.
here. It simply, like, it's dumb example. It grabs uh, the astronomer logo from our website and
Mm-hmm.
it uploads it to an Azure blob.
Ah. Okay.
That's all it does.
Okay.
Um, and it uses the Azure provider that we looked at briefly in the presentation. So
Mm-hmm.
the Azure provider has lots of operators for lots of different Azure services,
Mm-hmm.
including one of them happens to be Azure Blob Storage. And you might know, Rashmi, I actually don't know why Azure Blob is referred to as like WASB, but
I don't know.
that's not our name. That's that's the Azure name. But anyway, this is the thing for connecting to Azure Blob. And all I do here is say, I'm going to connect to it through this, and you'll see in a few minutes, you'll see the Airflow connection, where that is the
Yes.
Azure Blob connection.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
I use the standard Python requests library to get the logo. And then I just use the Airflow Azure provider to load that file into a particular container in that blob storage. And the rest
Yeah.
of this, like,
I'm gonna just pause you a bit. I wanna
yeah,
just throw my wild guess of what WASB could be. I
okay,
think it's Windows Azure Storage Blob. Okay, it was very wild. Now back to you.
it could it could be. It's plausible. It could be.
Yeah, I don't know.
And so that's really the meat of this. The rest of it is this is the definition of the DAG. Again, the DAG is the workflow. And what this DAG is saying is it the first time that it could ever run is the 1st of this month. It's set to run on a daily schedule. So this would run at midnight UTC every night. I've set a parameter called catch up equals false. If you go through the academy that I mentioned earlier, you'll learn all about this. Basically, if you don't set this, your DAG will backfill when you first run it. So if I was to first run this DAG, it would go back to November 1st, and it would run this because it's run on a daily schedule, and it starts on November 1st, and it would backfill. It would run the job for November 1st, for November 2nd, for November 3rd. Now, I don't, in this, sometimes that's what you want, but in this case, I just want to run this thing one time for a quick demo. So I'm
Yeah,
saying
yeah.
catch up is false.
But
I'm
this is
also
this is a
highlighting,
great parameter.
yeah, I'm also highlighting here, this is just a best practice for all of your, like, not like many best practices, not everyone does it all the time, but it is a best practice to put retries on all of your tasks and to make your tasks be atomic or idempotent so that if they run multiple times, they won't break the data. And the reason why this is a best practice is just if anything bad happens, it'll just at least try it again. Um, and the default args here is going to pass any task that runs in this DAG will get these default args. So by defining this number of retries once in the DAG definition, even if in this case, this DAG really only has one task, but in a real world DAG that might have like 30 different tasks, they would all get the one retry as their default thing. Just for the sake of demo, I have also, but they really don't do anything useful or interesting. I also threw in here a starting task and an ending task. And they just use the empty operator. So they literally do nothing. But I just did it so that you could see how you can then chain tasks together in your DAG. So the first task is the start. And then if that completes successfully, it'll run the upload file. And if that completes successfully, it'll run the end.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then to actually deploy this, I need a
Oh,
project.
can I just ask one more question?
Yeah,
If you scroll down a bit in the lines, I think the second last line,
yeah.
it kind of called out like start, arrow, upload file, arrow, and
Mhm.
does that what is that what defines the sequence in which we want to
That's what defines the
do the?
sequence. Yeah,
Oh, okay, okay,
that's right,
beautiful.
exactly. This can get more complicated and so on. And again, if you go through the Astronomer Academy link that we showed, you get into all those
Mm-hmm,
details. But yeah, this is it. You use these binary shift operators in Python to
mm-hmm,
define the sequence. So what I'm going to do next is make a project this to live in. And I'm not screen sharing the Astro UI right now, but the UI gave you, like, you could copy paste from the UI to do these things. So I've already installed the Astro CLI, like I said. So I'm going to initialize my project. What this does is it gives me a well-defined Airflow project, sort of an almost empty one. It actually does have a couple of example DAGs in them. These don't connect to Azure or anything, but you can run them and you can see what they do. We don't need to do anything special for this demo, but this thing is very flexible. This is basically going to give me a Docker image that I can deploy to Astro. So if I need custom Python dependencies, I can put them in there. If I need custom OS level packages, I can put them on the image. If I need to muck with the Docker file and do whatever stuff, I can do all that. So it's very, very flexible. I don't need to mess with any of that for what I'm doing here. I do need to just grab like this DAG that we were looking at above. I just want to grab it and drop it into the DAGs folder. So now in our DAGs folder, we have 3 workflows that are here. The last thing that I probably need to make sure I log out first to make sure I log into the right place. But I'm going to, I log the CLI into Astro. And this unfortunately, I'm not screen sharing this part, but this popped up the login page for me to log into, basically, which I will do. I swore I told this thing to stay signed in earlier, but okay. There we go. And then the last thing I do is I'm going to deploy this. And in this case, I'm going to tell it with the --dags to just deploy the DAGs. Because I didn't need to customize the Docker image in any way, I don't need to upload the whole image. I just need to push over the DAG that we created. So I am going to stop sharing again and go back to the web, if that's okay.
So I have one question while we are bringing up your previous screen.
Yeah.
So the reason you did the logout and the login, can you explain that again? I think I did not get that.
So if you were actually following these, oh, oops, I actually shared the wrong one. Sorry about that. If you were, this is the right one. If you were doing this from scratch, where you had just installed the CLI yourself from scratch, and then you did this deploy, the CLI would make you it would just automatically ask you to log in because it's never been logged in before. So it asks you to log in. Because I already had the CLI installed and I had been prepping for this webinar, so I had deployed this to a different org earlier. I just
Okay,
wanted to
okay.
make sure that I was logged out of that and just make sure I was logged in to the new org that I had just
Okay,
created a few minutes ago. But you wouldn't actually need to
understood.
do that step if you were actually doing this from scratch as a brand new
Understood.
user. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
The other thing that I need to do is I need a connection in Airflow for the Azure blob that we set up. So I'm going to open the Airflow UI to create that connection. For anyone that's watching that is familiar with Airflow, you get access to full-blown Airflow inside Astronomer. So if you're familiar with the Airflow UI, it is just a regular thing that you either know and love or know and hate, one or the other. In here, I'm going to make a new connection, and I'm going to, the connection name in my DAG was Azure Blob. So that's what I'm going to set. And I'm going to pick the Azure Blob storage type of connection. I need to grab my blob name. So this is where the thing lives, like the storage account in Azure. And I'm going to grab the token for that as well and plug that in.
Are these things you're grabbing from the CLI, or is that available somewhere else?
From Azure itself. I can show that
Oh, okay, okay,
if you're
okay.
interested. I actually messed that up though. I put it the wrong place. This is better.
Mm-hmm.
And now I need to rotate this key because I accidentally shared a key on the recording. So I need to remember to rotate that after.
Yeah,
But
sure.
that connection should be set up now.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, if you want, I can go show where that lives in the Azure portal.
Yeah, I think we could possibly do that as well so that people can know where
Sure.
to get their data from.
By the way, this is the other part of this. So this is the file that I was going to upload, the Astro logo
Uh-huh.
file. And this
Uh-huh.
is just kind of showing that is not there yet because we haven't run it
Ah,
yet. If
yeah.
I go into the Azure portal and I search for storage accounts, this is where I'm going to see any blob storage accounts that have been set up.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing that I needed was this. So
Mm.
that was the like the storage account itself is what I plugged in
Yeah.
there.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I needed was an access key. There's
Okay.
Azure is pretty flexible, so there's actually
Mm-hmm.
lots of ways that you could authenticate to
Mm-hmm.
blob storage. Um,
Yeah.
there's in a webinar that Reshmi and I did earlier this week. There's a much better way, a much more secure way using Azure Workload Identity, which it's a bit like the CI/CD thing. Like that is the way you should probably do it in production, but for your like quick and dirty first little experiment, the Azure will automatically generate you an access key. Actually, generates you a
Yeah.
couple of access keys by default.
Yeah.
You don't have to create these yourself; they're just already there for you. So it makes it pretty easy to just do this as your very first one.
Yeah. And
And
while you're at it, maybe you can just rotate your key. I mean, don't
oh
don't
yeah,
close the tab.
well
Don't rotate it yet. I think.
I
Yeah.
can't do it yet because it will break later. But
Yeah.
yes,
That's what.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, exactly. This is where I need to come back and do that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Um, let's see, did this actually work for us? It did not. How annoying. The DAG deploy
Did it go
did.
to the other
It
organization by any
might
chance?
have gone to the other org. It might have. So apologies for that. I might have screwed that part up. So I will have to. The screen that I shared mistakenly last time is the one that I will
It's
have
okay.
to.
Connor, why don't we do this? Let's look in the other org itself. If you already have it over there, maybe we, for the demo purposes, that should do the job. We went through the whole steps anyway.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's what I will do.
And demo gods are never like kind whenever you're doing the demo. So it's a trauma everyone lives on a day-to-day basis. I'm just so surprised that people when they do demo on, big talks like Ignite and Build, I don't know how they just like are so prepared. I'm sure they do like hundreds of practices.
They're normally videos, having been involved
Yeah,
in
but
some of those.
we do have live ones, and I'm not sure how confident they are about how everything's gonna pan out well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So this is the same DAG.
Hmm.
Uh, so we had the two tasks that don't do a whole lot: start, upload, and end. And we can just run this DAG.
Yeah. So what decides a start and an end to be complete, given that it's empty? Does it just like parse through?
Yeah, exactly. It just like parses through. Yeah.
Ah.
You
Oh, I
can
see these tiny dots going by.
Yeah, you can either run these things in the Astro UI or
Uh-huh.
in the Airflow UI. They both
Airflow
give
UI.
similar.
Okay.
They both give similar views. What we're
Yeah.
trying to do in the Astro UI is just let you, um, like you don't have to leave our UI to run stuff. This might take
Yeah.
a little while to run because of the scaling that I talked about. So this is actually like the slight double-edged sword of scaling is
Mm-hmm.
by default, we will scale you down to 0, which is actually what you want most of the time,
Yeah.
because that
Yeah.
means you're not spending any money.
Yeah.
And if you are running lots of tasks continuously, then you'll always have some workers up and running because you're always
Yeah.
running stuff. But if you're not running them, they'll scale down to zero, and then they will take some time to run.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Makes
now
sense.
we're
It's a
basically
fair
at the
trade-off.
end. Yeah, we're basically at the end now, one way or the other, and just time for questions as we're waiting for this essentially.
Yeah. Folks who are there in the call right now, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat. We can pick it up now. If not, I know, Connor, I am just dumping you with hell loads of questions from my end itself. So I hope that was something which just made the session more interactive because I'm really curious to learn how this works as well. Like I worked on you in the first part, right? Like making the integration from Azure till Astro. Now, what happens from Astro till Airflow? I think that's something which I would definitely love to play around with as well.
Yeah,
Awesome. So, do you have any idea on how long it's expected to take?
it could take a few minutes, but
Mhm.
it's sort of because it was such a toy example. It's sort of like
Yeah,
it's not going to do anything super exciting except upload this file to the
the logo.
to
Yeah,
the to
yeah,
the blob store. Yeah.
yeah. Do you
Um,
have any application which already has this done? Like you ran it maybe like in one of your trial runs? We can probably just look into how the end product looks like.
I do not because I deleted it from
Oh God,
Azure
no.
from the Azure container.
But yeah,
Like
no worries. I think yeah, we did touch the crux of what we want to do in this
oh,
call.
there it
So
goes. So you see it, it just turned
that
to green. So it did
woohoo!
complete. And now
That
if
was
I
not few
load
minutes. That was just
this
few
again,
seconds.
there
Oh
we go.
yeah, I see
Yeah.
that. Yeah, yeah.
But that
Awesome.
is again like that did take a while, right? That was
Yeah,
because a new worker was getting created to run the task,
correct.
which is the trade-off of scale to zero.
Yeah.
We actually have, I mentioned this in the webinar we did earlier in the week.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we have an Azure customer right now. I wish they onboarded via our new service. They onboarded just before we launched our new service. They are
Uh-huh.
running 1 million Airflow tasks a day on top
Oh,
of Airflow, which is really big. Like
yeah.
we talk to like Airbnb and other
Uh-huh.
companies that are been running Airflow for many years, where they're not using a
Mm-hmm.
managed service. You know, they're like Airbnb created the project originally.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
don't run anywhere close to a million tasks per day. Like
Yeah.
this Azure customer of ours is pushing Airflow to new performance and scale limits. It's pretty cool.
It's gonna be a real life load testing for you folks.
Oh, yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. I think we are at the end of the demo. I don't see any questions in the chat at this point of time, but we should probably leave it up to the folks to reach out to us whenever they have any questions. So, everyone who's there in this call, we have both our social handles over here on the screen. So, if you have more questions, if there is anything that we could probably help you with in your Airflow journey, in your Astro journey, we are here to reach out to. So, thank you so much once again for everyone who joined us in this call. We have a set of resources that we would share with you, some of them which we already shared in the screen, which can help you with your initial journey, which can help you with like docs, trying it out, etc. So all of that will be shared in the chat, and it will also be added to the description of the video if you want to watch it on demand later. And that's the end of my wrap. I know I've just like spoken without taking a breath. Connor, do you have any ending comments?
I do not. Thank you for that wrap up. That's great, and thanks for inviting me along here. This was really fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking our time late at night. And I really appreciate the fact that we have done this to reach out to our folks and let them experience the new product that we have. Once again, I want to call out we have free $300 your credit for anyone who is trying it out today. So please go check out our product, try it out, let us know how it is. And we are always available to hear from you and improve the product for you further. So thank you so much once again, everyone who has joined us across the globe. And with that, we call it a day. Thank you.
Bye bye.